Well, greetings, imagination connoisseurs. Once again, it is I, your Duke of Dope Discourse, your master of fun and wonder, your viceroy of verisimilitude, your sommelier of sci-fi or cinema, depending on who you talk to, your archbishop of Banterbury, your chancellor of cheerfulness, your evangelist of the imagination, and of course, your existential Mr. Rogers, Robert Meyer Burnett. That's right, and I am Robcasting at you imagination connoisseurs, you members of this, the Post-Geek Singularity. This is Robservations episode number 605, the show about something. 605 episodes of the show about something. And you know, there is not a lot of entertainment news, and I have to say, I was scouring entertainment news. I wasn't looking at the time. I realized it was like 4 minutes before I was supposed to go on. I clicked on my software and it said there was an update. So I apologize. I mean, you know, sometimes I legitimately have work, and I'll say I've got, like, you know, a work call or something. It's legit. Today, I was just slacking off. So I apologize for that. But I did have to update the software, which I didn't know. But if I'd, you know, not waited until the last minute, I wouldn't be late. I would have been on at 2:30. So anyway, and to be honest, I was looking low and far and high and wide for something to talk about, something interesting. And there's interesting stuff going on. I mean, hey, they're going to reboot Spy Kids. So there's that. So there you go. I've told you that. And, you know, there's some front runners. To Five Bloods was picked by one of the critics associations as the best movie of the year. I think it's a great film. Nice to see Spike Lee getting more recognition. Always good to see when Spike, one of the architects of the independent film movement of the 80s and 90s. I mean, he has been a world-class filmmaker now for quite some time. And anytime you can give Spike Lee some more credit, I'm all for it. But other than that, what can we talk about? Well, I'll tell you. You know what we can talk about? We can talk about what you want to talk about today. And thank God you people are can I speak? You people are very loquacious. Is it? I don't know what it's called when you write a lot, but I guess not loquacious. But I believe I'm listening to your voices every time I read your letters. So, and there's a couple of good ones, starting off with Paul in Long Beach. Paul in Long Beach writes in, boy, am I happy he wrote this in, because, man, I got to tell you, and I even know somebody who was a heavy hitter on he was involved in the creation of the show. The Stand, ladies and gentlemen. The Stand, I can't tell you what a monumental disappointment and it's not because it's CBS, and it's not because of X and R. I'm just really disappointed in this because The Stand is one of my favorite books of all time. And the flashback structure in my mind doesn't work at all. And Paul from Long Beach wrote in, and Paul from Long Beach says, as you may recall, Rob, I canceled CBS last year. I canceled CBS last year prior to Picard. In that letter, I also stated that we should have no confidence in the production of The Stand. Gosh, I wish I was wrong. So my neighbor and her boyfriend went up to Big Bear for the week, and we're cat-sitting. I asked permission and caught up on the 6 episodes released so far. I'm dumbfounded to the point of being almost speechless. This is a dumpster fire inside of a clusterfuck, neatly wrapped up in a New Vegas circle jerk, almost to the point of being offensive. And I know offensive. Was Stephen King really okay with this type of story structure? I just can't believe that he accepted the portrayals of Tom Cullen and Trash Can Man as written. The journey? Gone. Character development? Almost none. This is embarrassing, Rob. Never would I say that this huge tome is easily adaptable, but this is absolutely the wrong way to treat this property. Let's not speak of nuance. There is none. 2021 is still young. Let's hope that The Stand is the worst thing we watch this year. Paul, I agree with you. I really do. I find The Stand baffling. I do like some of the actors, but I do not, for the life of me, understand the structure or, well, mostly the structure of this show. As I've said before, I find it to be incredibly inert. I feel nothing when I watch it. I'm going through the paces because I'm watching it, and I'm like, they filmed it, and there's all of this stuff going on, but I feel nothing, which I find to be shocking. I mean, even when I watched Mick Garris's original Stand miniseries in, 94? And while obviously it was done on the cheap, like the first 2 hours of his miniseries, I loved it. You know, I loved Gary Sinise. I loved a lot of the cast. And it was at least a faithful adaptation of the story, and it was written by Stephen King. It was scripted by Stephen King. He wrote the screenplay for it. And I thought he did a really great job of distilling the story, his own story, down. And I don't know. They have twice as much time to tell, more than twice as much time to tell the story this time. And the flashback structure, I think, doesn't work at all. And as I said, I was baffled. I figured that was something they came up with in editorial, but I guess not. And, you know, his son, Stephen King's son, has worked on it, but I'm sure that maybe he was I don't know if it was he was required to be hired on or something, but I just feel that, you know, you heard about how Josh Boone had written various drafts of this. It was going to be a movie, and I would have thought that, I don't know, that there was just more. I've been quite shocked, to be honest, where The Stand has left us, because what I don't understand is the one thing that you always have to go back to is the book. And anyone who's read the book knows that it has a very compelling first third. When you meet the characters on the journey moving forward, there's a narrative propulsiveness to the first part of that book, where you're meeting everyone and they're going to their various places, and there's a literal forward momentum to the story. A put one foot in front of your other foot in front of the other momentum that keeps you going. And I find it baffling that here's something that indeed this is not something that, it's not rocket science, and I honestly I don't understand it. And I find it, you know, I think there's a real lesson here. I have found this flashback structure, it's used in two ways. That there's the lost or the manifest, but the lost flashback structure where you're jumping back and forth through time, you're jumping back and forth through time. And it's interesting. And the actual jumping back and forth through time is actually building a progressive plot. So you're constantly getting new information. Like something happens, and then you find out that John Locke was in a wheelchair, and then he's walking or something. And the way that they did it in Lost made sense. It was kind of novel. It was kind of unique, and there was a propulsiveness to that storytelling. Well, then it became a cliche, and everybody started doing it. But there are interesting ways that I have enjoyed the flashback structure in the modern day. Well, I say modern day. It's not like Lost wasn't modern, but you know what I mean. So one of the things that I really enjoy is when they'll start an episode or something 10 years ago. Something like in Breaking Bad where you'll learn something about Gus Fring. And it's not, you're going back a long way, but it's answering questions that have already been put in your brain because you've watched the show for a while, and suddenly you're wondering, like, I wonder how Gus Fring, started. He has this chicken business, but how could he become a drug kingpin? And that's already in your mind, and then they'll go back and they'll illuminate that through a cool flashback, but it's not structural. It's not baked into the DNA of a story. I like that. I've always liked that in storylines when they do something like that, because you're not over-relying on the flashback structure. You're hiding something from people, and I don't like that. It seems to me it can be done well, or it can be done in a very lackluster, we're covering up for our bad writing kind of a way. And when it comes to The Stand, one of my favorite books in the world, when I first read it, I want to say I read it when it first came out, that Signet paperback with the black and blue cover with the crow on it. And the first time, and of course, the Science Fiction Book Club, I did not buy The Stand off the rack. I got the Science Fiction Book Club version that had the crow and the guy in white, which looks like Luke Skywalker fighting, and that famous cover of the first edition. And I just don't understand why a book that lays out the structure for you and already has made a miniseries that, despite its low budget, was rather successful in terms of telling the story. And I watched that thing, and I just find it there. I'm not involved in the story, and maybe it's because I already know the story, and so whenever they go back in time, I'm like, yeah, okay, I get it. And I find they have made Randall Flagg just a really boring. I mean, you've got you've got Alexander Skarsgård, who looks great, who just doesn't look like he's having as much fun as, say, Jamie Sheridan did when he played Randall Flagg over 25 years ago. And I don't understand it. I don't get it. I don't know, why is it that today's television showrunners, they all think they seem, I shouldn't say they all think, because this isn't true. There's so much good TV, whether it's The Queen's Gambit, whether it is Breaking Bad or Better Call Saul, whether it's The Crown, whatever your jam is, there's a lot of great television writing. But when I watch something like Star Trek Discovery, for instance, I feel the writers are just out of their depth. They're people that have been hired as, these are reliable, dependable staff television writers, and they don't know anything about science fiction. But in the case of The Stand, I read interviews with the showrunners. Oh, I love this book. But when the showrunner starts telling me that he thinks one of the main protagonists of The Stand is Harold Lauder, and I figured that's the way we're going to start the story, I'm like, bruh, you clearly are bringing your childhood into the writing that you're doing. And there's nothing wrong with that. But when you're adapting someone else's material, you should have a fealty to that material first. And if that material works really well, why are you making this change to it? It's such a strange thing. We talked about it yesterday on the show about these franchises reaching middle age, but I really don't get, like, okay, why is it that people feel the need to go back and say, oh, I don't know, retcon Doctor Who? I mean, we're talking the origins of Doctor Who. Like, what's the point of that? Like, I would think that if you're chosen to be a modern custodian of a building, there's a reason why here in America, when buildings, for instance, are designated historical for whatever reason, like say it's a Frank Lloyd Wright house, you can do certain improvements to things, maybe upgrade the plumbing or the electricity, but the facades and the original architecture and what the building originally was is to be preserved. I almost feel, in a way, that maybe these franchises, like, once a franchise reaches a certain age, and The Stand, I would consider maybe not a franchise, but it's part of Stephen King's canonical works, part of his classic period, I almost feel that there should be some kind of creative limitations put on the latest custodians of these franchises, because if they don't particularly have an affinity or a fealty to these things, why are they allowed to go in and make fundamental sweeping changes to something that's existed, well, past the creators? If somebody created something and that creator is gone, maybe there should be some kind of a law passed that when the creator passed away, at least, whatever existed from that property before the creator passed away, you must maintain a fealty to that. You must stay true to that. You can't go back and change the origin of a Time Lord. I mean, and by the way, why would somebody want to? Why can't you tell a new story? Why do you have to go back and then make fundamental changes to something that Well, it wasn't yours in the first place to do that to. Carry the torch forward. Tell us new stories. Certainly make them more relevant to today's modern audiences. But why go back and mess with the past? Why go back and change the cornerstones of characters? I don't understand. Because it seems like when people go back and do that, things are going to get dated very quickly. There's a reason why a lot of these franchises have endured for as long as they have, because there's a timeless quality to the storytelling. And when I mean timeless, I mean the fundamental underlying qualities of the storytelling. Az, who I do the Prisoner reviews with and who I've been doing Fully Articulated with on Hot Toys, he had a great birthday stream, and there was one point where you had Just Some Guy, you had Critical Drinker, you had all of these people that actually do deep dive analysis into why stories work. And I was just I felt, hey man, since we're all here, I was asking the panel. I mean, it was also, you had Gary from Nerdrotic. It was a great panel. But Just Some Guy and the Critical Drinker had some really interesting things to say about the timelessness of great storytelling. And really, all of it comes down to our own experience of the world. Humanity, all of us, and when I say humanity, I mean the entire collective humanity. It doesn't matter what culture you're from. It doesn't matter what color you are. It doesn't matter what language you speak. There are certain core things that I think humanity, all of us, understand. For instance, I was talking about this the other day, aging. We all understand what it means to be getting older. We all understand to finally reach a point where you realize there's more days behind you than there is in front of you. We all realize what it's like to maybe not have become what you wanted to be in life. We all understand disappointments, whether they're career disappointments, whether they're romantic disappointments, whether they're familial disappointments. These are things that work cross-culturally, and it's these truths that we all grapple with in our lives. Well, they're the basis of where all great stories come from. So when you're telling stories, if you go back and you watch the original, say, Twilight Zone, the reason why Rod Serling's Twilight Zone works, and the people that wrote for the Twilight Zone, whether it was Rod Serling himself or George Clayton Johnson or Charles Beaumont or Richard Matheson, these were storytellers that were basing their tales, even though they're fantastical, they were based and steeped in the human truths. We understand human beings we have a prejudice on many different levels, not just against people that look different than us, but people that maybe are richer than we are. They might look the same, but they have things that we don't have. And those are basic human truths that go all the way back, I think, to our primate brains. Like that ape has more girls than I have, or that has more acorns or whatever, more whatever food, whatever it is. There's that envy that always perks up in all of us at certain points, and things that we're not proud of. And this is where all the great stories come from, because they're universal and everybody can understand them. But now I feel we live in an age where the storytellers, a lot of the storytellers, especially the storytellers that are working on these franchises that have been around for a long time, rather than be custodians and realize they're running like in a marathon, you have a baton handed to you. When the baton is handed to you, you're not supposed to change the baton. You're supposed to carry the baton down the track up to the next runner and hand that baton off. And that's what a marathon is. And I feel that what ends up happening is when a lot of these showrunners, and maybe it's because when you look at Doctor Who's a perfect example, when you go from the Russell Davies era of Doctor Who into, well, now in the Chris Chibnall era of Doctor Who, it's these writers, I think in the case of Russell Davies, he did broaden the myths and the canon of Doctor Who, but there was an understanding, I think, and there was a respect to Doctor Who, and even when things like Torchwood, well, you have Unit, but when you have Torchwood created, even Torchwood, here you have a whole new cast of characters, but even with Torchwood, look, I don't want to get in Miracle Day, but Torchwood season 3, the 5-episode Children of Earth, is one of the finest things that I've ever seen in terms of televised science fiction. If you haven't seen, I'd never even seen Torchwood. I mean, I had a man crush on Captain Jack, but let me tell you, I'd never seen Torchwood, and I watched Children of Earth, man, and I was going to watch one episode. Somebody said, yeah, it's just really good, you should watch it. And I'm like, I haven't seen the first 2 seasons. They're like, doesn't matter, watch it. I put on Torchwood at like 1 in the morning. I had to be at work at like 9. I watched the whole thing straight through. I stayed up all night and slept for like 2 hours. It was that good. And that was adding to the Doctor Who mythology, tangentially, obviously, but it was still really good. So I just don't understand why we keep seeing these shows where the creators want to go back and mess around with the foundational cornerstones of these properties. And I feel that the corporate minders can't be happy with the amount of money that these things are bringing in. They can't be smashing successes. I can't believe that The Stand has been doing really well in terms of ratings for CBS. And honestly, if I was an executive and somebody was going to adapt The Stand and I was given the first episode of The Stand to watch and I saw an episode that mostly dealt with Harold Lauder, I would have been like, what the hell's this? Why have you chosen to go this direction? And anyway, Paul, I don't know, we could be on this topic for a long time, but I want to thank you for writing in. And I'm glad someone feels my pain, because by God, is The Stand disappointing. Here comes a letter from Steven. Uh-oh. Hey, Rob, this is another letter about the objectivity of art. I was thinking of stories like Alice in Wonderland and Peter Pan and thought it was strange that we all still adapted these stories over 200 years later after they were published. It has to be more than the subjectivity of art for these stories to last that long. Yes, sir. Touché. Thank you. I don't think art would last long if we didn't critique it. It makes sense to have a national film registry to tell future generations what films stood the test of time and what films had the most cultural significance. I don't understand this argument of art being subjective or objective. Why can't it be both? Because I think anything else can be both objective and subjective. I was watching videos and looking about articles about this topic and found this quote: "A masterpiece must be universal rather than subjective." I get it. It means that a painting must convey a universal experience rather than a subjective one. Someone's experience with art is subjective rather than the actual art itself. Isn't art a universal language and it speaks to us in different ways? Doesn't it understand what it means to be human? Human. I think it should be both, objective and subjective, because art understands the universal language of the human experience. Well, you know what? This is a short letter, Stephen, but I got to tell you, you and I certainly park our shuttlecrafts in the same shuttle bay. I agree with that. You know, I've constantly said I go through this argument with John Campea all the time. I believe that there is an objectivity to great art, great storytelling, whatever it is. And that it is all, and people say, well, what criteria are you judging it by? I'm like, look, all I can tell you is that the great storytelling, the great art, it all goes back down into the conveyance of truth of the human experience. There is a universality to the human experience. We are, the sooner we understand this, there is one race of humans on this planet. I mean, and I don't throw, you've got Neanderthal DNA in you. I know. But there's one race of people, one race of human beings on this planet. Whether you think of yourself as black or whether you think of yourself as brown or yellow or pink with polka dots, I don't care. There's one human race, and each one of us, each member of this human race is unique. There's only one of us. I mean, yes, I know there are twins. I get it. But you don't understand my drift. 99.999% of us, we're unique. We're unique in the entire universe. We're the only ones of us that exist. And why we would be so eager to want to get rid of any one of us, I will never understand. I will never understand that, because the most valuable thing that we have on this planet, as a matter of fact, do you know why humans are valuable to the universe itself? Because we're here to see the universe. Think of it. The infinitude of the cosmos doesn't know, as far as we know, doesn't know itself. I mean, you look up at the night sky. You start seeing deep photographs from space. There is a beauty and a wonder to the universe. And the only people that we know of so far that can perceive that wonder, that can feel that wonder, is us. Entire universe. We're the only ones that get to look up and wonder. Whether we're wondering for ourselves, whether we're looking up in awe and wonder. That's an amazing thing. But I think that there's one thing that we've proven throughout all of human existence is that looking up into the night sky and wondering is something that's universal to almost all of us. I know there are people that never look up and wonder. I get it. There's people with the daily concerns of looking down are too much, and I get that. But even that, even the heaviness of daily life, that's tough too. But we all understand that. We all collectively get that. And I think that art, the great stories, the great paintings, the great novels, even the great video games, all of those things collectively, they have a universality to them. And when they are great, there's something that is universal that moves beyond subjectivity. Because the problem with subjectivity is not everybody has the same gaze. Everybody's gaze is different, and everybody's gaze is not equal. I mean, an educated person, who's somebody who, say, knows everything about Manet or Monet, take your pick. Anyone who knows anything about both of those artists, that really understands their history, and they're going to appreciate art more than, say, someone who doesn't. And the subjectivity of art is really, or the subjectivity of anything, can come down to how much do you personally know about something and how much are you interested in it. So whether art means something to you or not, well, that's up to you. That's the subjectivity of you. That's your subjectivity. But that doesn't mean the art is somehow lesser because of what you think of it. The art exists outside of you. And, you might not like, the other day, we're doing whining on whining about movies. We're doing Westerns. I used to not like Westerns. I wouldn't even watch them. So there was a time in my life when I had never seen The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, much less appreciate it. And I would write it off. Well, that was my fucking problem. If I hadn't seen A Fistful of Dollars for a Few Dollars More and The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, whose problem was that? And if I didn't recognize their genius, I mean, it was not subjective that those movies, it was not subjective that The Good and the Bad and the Ugly is I think one of the greatest movies ever made, because I'd never seen it before. And if I'd never seen it before, but it's there on the shelf, if I don't recognize the genius of The Good and the Bad and the Ugly, doesn't mean the genius of it isn't there. So the idea that art is subjective is ridiculous, because if you haven't watched or looked at it yet and the art still exists, can the art be great? Is that some sort of a Schrodinger's cat thing? You can't recognize the greatness of the art because you haven't actually observed it yet? Something like that? I think that there is a truth. There is an observable objectivity to artwork. Now, whether you like it or not, there is something that goes beyond. And you know what? One day we'll be able to measure it, I think. We don't understand consciousness. We don't understand how things hit us. And also, part of that objectivity would have to be, you'd have to take people from all walks of life and be able to measure, like you could show people a picture, for instance. Now, we don't know how to measure these things yet, but when we discover consciousness more and we have quantum computing or whatever the hell it is, I'll bet you'll be able to take 100 people from all walks of life and show them certain things, like the Mona Lisa. And I'll bet, once we have devices that can measure these kinds of things, I will bet that we will be able to actually measure somehow figure it out. There'll be some kind of amazing computational program that will actually be able to measure the greatness of art, the objective goodness of art or storytelling. I mean, obviously, when a story is told, there's a lot within a person that has to happen for them to think that a great movie is a great movie. I mean, first and foremost, like, people wouldn't go to see Shawshank Redemption, for instance. I don't want to watch a movie about prisons. All right. So immediately somebody's gone in because maybe they were in prison. Maybe they have a relative who is in prison. Maybe they just don't like stories set in prisons. For whatever reason, they're already adverse to watching a story or experiencing a story about a prison. So right then and there, could they ever be? Can we ever count on them to tell us whether The Shawshank Redemption is a good movie or not? I don't think it's fair. Subjectively, for them, they might not like it, but that doesn't take away from how good of a movie The Shawshank Redemption actually is. Also, a lesson in how to adapt Stephen King correctly. I mean, you could tell people that, and you know what? In the original story, which is called Rita Hayworth and Shawshank Redemption, it appeared in 1982 in the book Different Seasons, the character of Red, Morgan Freeman's character, was a white dude. Now, in the movie, Frank Darabont made the sweeping change of turning the character of Red into Morgan Freeman. Why do they call him Red? Maybe it's because I'm Irish. Well, there's a time now somebody might say, oh, that was done for diversity's sake. No. Morgan Freeman brought a quality to that character that was indelible. He took something and made it his own. And Darabont saw that, my God, you know what? Stephen King's story, the color of a character doesn't matter in that story, or actually in that particular role. So there is an instance where you can have an actor who is not like he is described in the story, a different color, in fact, but takes that. Can you imagine if you read Rita Hayworth and Shawshank Redemption now? If you read that story, and by the way, I recommend you do because it's so great. I used to read it every year for Christmas. It was my Christmas story as a Jew. Read that story, and I defy you, when the character is being described, not to see Morgan Freeman. And to me, that's why I think to myself, the things that I've liked as I have grown up, there have been times like that where the race of a character was changed, and I didn't scream bloody murder. I watched the film. It never even bothered me because I already loved Morgan Freeman all the way back in, 1987 when I first saw him in Street Smart with Christopher Reeve. If you haven't seen that movie, that's one of Morgan Freeman's first roles. You got to check that out because it's great. I mean, it was great. Loved it. But anyway, I didn't even address what Stephen was saying. I think stories like Alice in Wonderland and Peter Pan, the reason people keep coming back to those stories is they have universal truths, universal human truths in them. Going through the looking glass, going into Wonderland, I mean, that is something that I think all of us, we have versions of it. Hell, every night we dream we have versions of that story in us. There's definitely something primal, something about that. And Peter Pan, the boy who never grew up, that's me. I mean, there's a truth to that story. And yeah, absolutely. So anyway, definitely something, great letters. A great letter. Let's see. Now here is a letter. Now this letter is interesting. This one comes from Jermaine K. Sorry, my mouse is running out of power. So I'm oh really? Did you have to do that? So I'm using as we talk, I am plugging in. Why is the Adobe Flash Player doing this? Anyway, so I am trying to power up my mouse. But this comes from Jermaine K. Jermaine K says, "Hello, Rob. Congrats on 600 episodes. I just finished episode 604, and I disagree with the notion of a midlife crisis for franchises. To me, what many fans are feeling is closer to deliberate disrespect. Our favorite franchises are being besmirched, and it's by design. The core values of Star Wars, Star Trek, Doctor Who, and others are being pushed aside, mocked, and dismissed as out of touch. What's worse, the fans who feel anger or disappointment at this treatment are being mocked as well. We're not afraid of change. We're afraid of bad change. We're afraid of change that belittles the core of the story and characters. Let me give you an example that's very personal to me, Rob. Batman. I've loved Batman for over 30 years, yet I have nothing positive to say about Batman versus Superman. The portrayal of Batman in that movie is horrible. Somehow the world's greatest detective is the dumbest man in the film. Batman should have found the flash drive with the Justice League symbols and videos on it, but he didn't. Batman doesn't murder people indiscriminately or at all, but he did in that movie. Since when is there a rocket launcher in the Batmobile? Hell, Rob, does he even know the name Wonder Woman when she shows up in her costume? That's not an evolution of the character. That's not a good change. That's garbage masquerading as change, and any fan who didn't like it are called toxic. To get good Batman content, I just play the Arkham games again and watch some animated series episodes. For a reason I will never understand, writers and producers that seem to have disdain for the franchises are being brought in to write them. I believe that's what many of us are feeling. We feel the disdain and the mocking. Think about it, Rob. Do you feel the disdain for OG Star Trek when you watch Discovery or Picard? How about Lower Decks? I felt it watching Luke Skywalker run away to be a coward hermit in The Last Jedi. I felt it watching Ichib get his eye ripped out on Picard. A midlife crisis would be a step up from that. Thanks, and take care. Well, I don't disagree with you, Jermaine. I think that you know, in the case of Star Wars, here's what I find interesting. Star Wars is not highbrow. I don't even think it's high art. If anything, it's pop art. And if anything, it's something that should be easily understood by all. Even the trailers for Star Wars talk about how it's a story of heroes and villains. And I find it really interesting that what happened to having heroic characters be heroic? You know, I mean, one of the great things about fantasy as a genre, one of the things that we keep coming back to, hell, going back to the Greek myths, hero stories are always something that, well, they make us feel good. There is a truth, I think, to any hero story. We love hero stories. I mean, one of my favorite movies, and it's not a movie I watch a lot, but it's a movie I think about a lot, and it's a movie I really love, is a movie called The Verdict that stars Paul Newman from the early 80s, directed by Sidney Lumet. It's a quiet story, but the stakes are a man's soul. And I love this film. And in this movie, Paul Newman, in one of he should have won the Best Actor award for this movie. He did not. I believe he lost to Ben Kingsley in Gandhi, which I understand because obviously Gandhi, historical figure, importance, showier role. But Paul Newman in The Verdict, man, one of my favorite film performances of all time. But he basically plays a lawyer who is an alcoholic. He's burnt out. He's on his last legs, and he gets a case. He takes on a case of negligence at a Catholic hospital. And it's a quiet story. And this man, he basically has to find it within himself, and he has to step up and take on, well, Goliath. It's a David and Goliath story. It's very biblical. Maybe that's one of the reasons I like the story. Just like I like the story of Job. These are primal favorite stories of mine, and I love seeing retellings of these stories in any form. Like the David and Goliath story is something that if it's done well, and think about it, how many stories are David and Goliath stories? A small character of some kind is going to take on a much larger, whether it's a corporation, whether it's an individual, and they triumph in the end against incredible odds. I mean, you can never go wrong with a good David and Goliath story. In my mind, and it works. You know, it works. Nowadays, it seems like we don't get many of those stories anymore. That somehow they've fallen from fashion. Like, I don't understand why hero story. I mean, actually, I do understand hero stories. I mean, the thing about hero stories is they have to dig deep within themselves. They have to find that. That thing, that quality, that spark of life that makes them transcend their own individualism, and maybe it's for the greater good, Maybe it's for whatever reason that the hero finds it is able to dig deep. And by the way, I don't care if a David and Goliath story is about a woman or a man. I love my female activist stories. I loved Norma Ray. I loved Norma Ray when she stands up with the sign in the factory. I love that. I loved Aaron Brockovich. I love stories. It doesn't matter. And I also don't like the assertion that for some reason that men don't like stories about strong women. No, men like stories about really well-written strong women that are fully realized, well-developed characters that we can admire. So perish the thought. And I love David and Goliath stories, and I'm sorry if I'm using a certain gender. It's just because that's the story in the Bible. But if you want to call it a Norma Ray story, you want to call it an Aaron Brockovich story, I have no problem with that at all. But those stories, I think, are great. Now, here's the thing. When it comes to characters like superheroes, obviously the character of Batman, there is a classical vision or version, both, of Batman. I think Batman, the animated series, is, if you want to know Batman, what is Batman, the character of Batman, and you don't want to read your way through hundreds of comic books, I think that the Batman, the animated series, is an incredible distillation of the Batman character and Batman mythos. And by the way, even if you've never watched animation before, or you're somebody that's like, oh, I'm not going to watch a cartoon, let me tell you, the art style of the Batman animated series alone is worth experiencing. The writing on that, the characterizations on that, Kevin Conroy's voice stylings, everything about Batman the animated series is an incredible translation from one medium to another that retains everything you need to know about the Batman mythology. And I go back to like the Denny O'Neil, Neil Adams comics of the 70s. To me, my definitive comic book Batman was the Neil Adams, Denny O'Neil stories in the 70s. Those are the stories that I read as a kid, and I knew they were a little bit more adult, and to me that was the definitive portrayal of the Batman. And I liked the Batman portrayal in the Justice League comics beginning in the 90s up through the early hundreds. I collected Justice League when I was a kid from the 90s up through like the 150s. And that was the only time I was collecting a comic book, and then I got heavily into it in the early '80s with the comic book renaissance. But now I understand how the portrayal of Batman, Ben Affleck's portrayal of Batman in Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice, I understand how that was not everyone's cup of tea, because it was. To my mind, it was a different portrayal of... See, here's what as somebody who liked Man of Steel, and I did, I approached the Zack Snyder versions of Superman and Batman as not necessarily definitive, but a different take. Like, I didn't expect Ben Affleck's Batman to be like Christian Bale's Batman. I liked Christian Bale's Batman. I liked the portrayal of Batman because what they're trying to do is they wanted to set, if Batman existed in this world, in our real world today, what would that look like? And I feel that what Nolan was doing and what Zack Snyder was doing was an attempt to do that. Tim Burton was not trying to set his Batman in the real world. He was creating, in a way, the same way that the Batman, the animated series, creates a noir world, a different, it's not supposed to be our world. It's supposed to be, the sort of animated reflection of our world, or the animated reflection of our world in the 30s with a modern sensibility. But when you look at Batman, the way Nolan did Batman, and the way that Zack Snyder was trying to do, I think, Superman and Batman, it's as if they were here now with us in the real world. And I thought in terms of Nolan's Batman worked really well. The whole idea of how he was using Wayne tech. I mean, sure, there's things that are a little bit fantastical that we don't have in our world, for instance. But for the most part, that's why Nolan wanted to shoot like in the streets of Chicago. He turned Chicago or Philadelphia or wherever the hell they shot into a real city. He wanted it to feel real, an authenticity. And I've loved that that's part of one of the reasons I love Nolan's work, whether you're watching a period piece like The Prestige, or you're watching Memento, or you're watching Insomnia, or you're watching, of course, Inception and Interstellar. He tries to create a sense of realism, and then his stories take place within that realism. And I like that. I like that about him as the viceroy of verisimilitude. Why wouldn't I? I think that's good stuff. But the Batman in Zack Snyder's movies was more of a real world, yet also it's science fiction. I put Zack Snyder's Batman squarely in the category of being part of a science fiction world. So it's not, when I look at the Ben Affleck's Batman, he's not the same kind of a Batman that I know and love. He's not the Batman, the animated series Batman. He's not even the Christian Bale Batman. He's a Batman that exists in the same universe that the Krypton, as portrayed in the beginning of Man of Steel, exists in. So I think of Superman, Man of Steel, and Batman v Superman, Dawn of Justice, and to a certain extent, Wonder Woman, the first Wonder Woman, and now I guess hopefully Zack Snyder's Justice League, in a certain science fiction context. And in that context, and remember, the way Batman is introduced, the way Bruce Wayne is introduced in Batman v Superman, Dawn of Justice, of course you do see the flashback scene, but when he runs into Metropolis that is under attack from Zod and Superman are fighting, that's one of my favorite superhero moments in any superhero movie ever. When Bruce Wayne lands and drives in to try and get to Wayne Industries, to his building, and he knows he's got his people there, and what he's seeing, the kind of cataclysmic science fiction destruction that has never existed before in the world until Man of Steel happens. No one's ever seen anything like that. We're in a different universe for Batman. So I watched that, and I'm like, okay, I've got all these different iterations of Batman. Now I'm getting, what does Batman look like in a science fiction world when there is a doomsday? And I don't think Christopher Nolan would have ever given us doomsday. I don't think he would have done that. I think that was anathema to what he wanted to do to his world. So when you have a Batman like that, I put aside my judgment of how I feel about Batman. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to take into account that the sci-fi 70s prog rock album cover Krypton that we saw at the beginning of Man of Steel is part of this world. And once you have that, and once you have Doomsday, and once you have Wonder Woman and all this, you now have a sci-fi world. So what I try and do is I try and look at the interpretation of that character within that world. And I'll tell you, the first time I see Batman in that movie, he rushes in to an embattled city to save his people. And that to me is the embodiment of who Batman is. Bruce Wayne in that beautiful suit, I'm like, bruh, that was Batman to me. Now, everything else that happens in that movie, the fact that Batman kills, the fact that Batman has rocket launchers on his Justice Mobile, I'm like, doesn't bother me. It doesn't bother me because this interpretation of Batman has been, I understand that it's part of this particular world. So what I tried and do, and this is why I enjoyed Man of Steel, I was like, okay, this is a science fiction version. It's a first contact story. It's much more a science fiction movie than it is a superhero movie. Sure, it's about superheroes. Yes, it's about Superman, but it's a much more science fiction version of Superman than, say, Christopher Reeve's Superman the movie. Even though Christopher Reeve, you begin with the super science of Krypton. So I guess, and being a lifelong comic reader, I'm able to compartmentalize. But I agree with you. Within Batman v Superman, there's a lot of dumb plotting, not very good writing. And I think that hampers the film. But, look, the way Batman worked with Alfred, very different depiction of Alfred, but I loved it. I loved it. I love Jeremy Irons and I love Ben Affleck working together. I loved them as actors. I wanted more. I would love to have seen them go out together and do something on the streets of Gotham or something. I really did enjoy that relationship. I enjoyed a lot of how Batman was depicted, but I understand there's a lot of people that get caught up, and you talk about that too. I didn't like when Batman was dumb. I didn't like the fact that Batman and Bruce Wayne, they don't know who each other is. They don't. There's a lot of stupid. There's a lot of stupid in Batman v Superman. There is. But I will say this. There's a vision in Zack Snyder's movies, and I hope it's fulfilled in the Snyder cut of Justice League. You might not like that vision, but there's a vision there. There's a vision nonetheless. It's something that I buy into, and I enjoy. But I totally understand your larger point is that writers and producers have a disdain for these things. I can't disagree with you. I think that these writers come onto these franchises. I'm going to tell you a theory. I have a theory. When I was watching modern Star Trek, and I mean starting with Next Generation, a lot of people did not like Rick Berman, and Star Trek fans like myself. What he did creatively to Star Trek, I'm like, you could make this show so much better if you did not hamper the writing staff so much, and you embraced the past of Star Trek and did more, let's call them fan servicey things. But as I look back on Next Generation, and I think it's cemented its place not only in Star Trek history but in television history. It's a tremendous show. I think one of the things that collectively made it a better show was not being a fan servicey show. When they first, of course, you had Dr. McCoy on in the pilot episode. He was not called Dr. McCoy. We all knew he was Dr. McCoy. He was Admiral McCoy. They waited until the third season, and they brought Mark Leonard back as Sarek. That's what you do. That was an amazing, and he was dealing with Bendai syndrome, but basically Alzheimer's. Great story to tell. Great use of that character. He had his dignity. It was 100 years later. He was still that character, the same actor, and yet you made it a new story, a relevant story, because you're telling a story, a universal story that we all understand. We all know or have relatives that deteriorated via old age. And here you take this incredible character that, we had last seen in Star Trek VI, The Undiscovered Country. Or actually, I don't know. That's not true. It might be the same year. Actually, I think Star Trek VI was after Sarek, to be honest, because you have 87, 88, 88, 89, 89, 90. So it would be. So we saw Sarek before we saw Undiscovered Country. So it was the second to last appearance as Sarek. And it was a great use of the character. And that, to me, if they did that all the time, and now we look back, we've got that, we've got Relics, we've got Unification, and that's about it. 178 episodes of The Next Generation, and it was not fan servicey. So I didn't like Rick Berman at the time, but I think later on, and then having met him and sat down with him and been able to ask him whatever questions I wanted to, I had a respect for what he was doing. But I still think that while Rick Berman brought us 25 seasons of Star Trek over 18 years and 4 feature films, I do feel that he thought he was slumming the whole time. I do. I thought that he thinks that, he's a very erudite man with great taste. And I think that he might find a little, it made him a lot of money, but still, I think he wishes he could have done something else. But I think there's a lot of creators that take these franchises on. And remember, think about them. As creators, they're taking on a franchise that they didn't create and they don't own. And no matter what they do, they're always going to live in the shadow of the people that created those franchises. That's why I think there should almost be a psychological exam given to people who are given the custodianship of a franchise. I mean, again, I have to say it, but I go back to Brian Fuller. If you want to see how a franchise can be reinvented, we have great versions of, you've got the original books. You know, I've got the original, whether it's Red Dragon, Thomas Harris's Red Dragon, Thomas Harris's Silence of the Lambs, Hannibal and Hannibal Rising. You have these 4 canonical books by Thomas Harris. Those are the things. Then we've got 2 versions of Red Dragon by 2 different directors. We've got Silence of the Lambs. We've got Hannibal Rising as films. And then you have Brian Fuller taking that mythology that we were all so familiar with and sort of turning it on its head and turning it into something else. But it's different. It's a totally different take on all that material. But it's awesome too, because it still retains the spirit and the love. Brian Fuller loved those books. You know, and what he did, if you go read The Art of, is it called The Art of Hannibal? There's a book on the making of Hannibal. I have it right over there, but it's amazing. And it's a great look into the making of a TV show. But it's because he loved it. He loved it. And how these showrunners get on these shows, everybody wants a job, so they're not going to say no. But it's amazing to me that the people that are doing the hiring don't vet these people. These people should be vetted, because what's happening is the franchises are being diminished. Everything, whether it's comic books, whether it's video games, whether it's TV shows or movies. These creators, if they don't have a specific love for this thing, or they want to inject these already proven commodities with their own kind of, let's call it politics, whatever it is, they're ruining the very thing they've been hired to perpetuate, to continue with. And I think it's definitely problematic. And ultimately, it costs everybody money. And until that's quantifiable, or people are going to look into that, it's going to continue. It's going to continue. Let's see. Omar comes in, and Omar writes a review. Omar94 says, "Hi, Rob, moderators, and Post-Geek Singularity. I recently saw One Night in Miami, directed by Regina King, and I wanted to give a review for it. I had read good things about it, but I had to see for myself if it was good. While I found there to be many good aspects, I found the movie to be just all right. I really liked the cinematography, the costume design, the set design, all the acting performances from the 4 leads, Kingsley Ben-Adir, Eli Goree, Aldous Hodge, and Leslie Odom Jr. were really good. My main problem I had was with the plot. I didn't find it to be that interesting. It basically just follows a fictionalized meeting of 4 prominent African-American figures, Malcolm X, Sam Cooke, Jim Brown, and Muhammad Ali. Well, first of all, dude, let me just say, I mean, come on. That alone, the idea of being able to, like, watch a conversation between Malcolm X, Sam Cooke, Jim Brown, and Muhammad Ali, that alone, I don't, you have me there. I don't care what the plot is. I just watch those 4 guys in a room talking. I know they're fictional recreations, but I love that stuff. It's like the movie, Nicholas Roeg's movie Insignificance, where you see Marilyn Monroe explain the theory of relativity to Albert Einstein. I love stories like that. All in all, I found One Night in Miami to be just all right. I wanted to like it, but I just couldn't. I'm not sure why, but this is very common for me when it comes to watching movies with get a lot of awards buzz, where I mostly just find the film to be either okay or not that good, while everyone else liked or loved it. That happened with Nomadland, where everyone else really praised it, but I just couldn't get into it. Thanks, and live long and prosper." Well, here's where your subjectivity comes in, Omar. I would bet that, there are just certain things that people don't like. I mean, certain things in your background, or certain things that interest you as opposed to things that don't interest you. So I absolutely can understand that. So yeah, I wouldn't worry about it. So guess what? I have a letter from Willow Yang, everyone. I know, everyone's like, oh, a letter from Willow. "Oh, hi, Rob," says Willow. "I am writing my review for Voyager's Timeless, which Joseph claims to have watched 50 times. 5 minutes into this episode, I find myself asking the question, does Voyager have an unusual number of time travel episodes, or does Joseph just like the time travel episodes? Half of the Voyager episodes I've watched thus far, Parallax, Time and Again, Year of Hell, and now Timeless, have involved time travel. To give a quick recap of Timeless, the episode opens with Kim and Chakotay on a frozen planet, coming across the remains of Voyager, which immediately inform me that there must be time travel involved. It is revealed, in scenes interspersed between the present and the future, that the Voyager had crashed 15 years ago while testing out a new slipstream engine that's supposed to bring them back to the Alpha Quadrant, killing everyone on board save for Kim and Chakotay, who were in a shuttle leading the larger ship. Kim, who is now a wanted outlaw, has been overcome with guilt for having sent the wrong phrase corrections to Voyager, resulting resulting in its doom, and is now determined to send a message back to the past to rectify the situation. He, of course, succeeds, saving everyone on board and erasing the entire future timeline. And LeVar Burton, who directed the episode, also makes a brief appearance, resuming his role as older Geordi LaForge. I have to say right off the top that Kim and Chakotay's actions in Timeless were completely reckless and unethical. They were essentially playing God and casting aside every living thing in the universe to erase 15 entire years of history in order to save their former crewmates. It is highly conceivable that things would have played out in their current timeline where the lives of many more people were saved or bettered. Heck, it's possible that the entire universe might have ceased to exist due to their meddling. And this brings me to Kim, who is the protagonist of this episode. Timeless is ultimately a story about a person's guilt and trauma, their inability to move on from the past, their obsession, which has caused them to ruin their life and do something utterly unconscionable. Kim quits Starfleet, commits various crimes, is wanted for high treason, and concocts an extremely dangerous and immoral plan in order to rectify the mistake that has haunted him for 15 years. I really like the format of Timeless, the interspersing of the scenes from the future and the present, quite reminiscent of All Good Things, which allowed for the juxtaposition of the two different Kims. While Garrett Wang might not be Patrick Stewart, I thought he did a commendable job of transitioning between the eager and optimistic younger Kim and the angry, short-tempered, and somewhat mentally unhinged older Kim. While I can understand Kim's reason for doing what he did, I do find Chakotay's role in the plan to be a little strange. From the relatively few episodes that I've seen, Chakotay strikes me as someone who would have probably been able to move on. Indeed, he appears to be much more emotionally well-adjusted than Kim is in the episode, and is even now romantically involved with someone. And speaking of whom, I found the character of Tessa to be underdeveloped, and I don't understand her motivations for going along with Chakotay, apart from the fact that they're having sex. Even though, as I've stated in the beginning of this letter, there was never any doubt in my mind that Kim and Chakotay were going to succeed and save the Voyager crew, the episode still managed to have a couple of twists. I liked that the new calculations Kim initially sent into the past still failed, and he had to settle for a more imperfect solution of keeping the Voyager in the Delta Quadrant. I also quite appreciated the cameo that LeVar Burton made. I haven't watched any of the Star Trek Next Generation movies, so I don't know what became of Geordi LaForge following the events of the series, but I do hope that this isn't the only timeline where he becomes captain. I will cap off with a couple of final thoughts. Firstly, it is the 5th season of Voyager, and some references in the episode indicate that more than 4 years have already passed since the ship became stranded in the Delta Quadrant. Why is Kim still an ensign? He appears to have become a crucial and respected member of the crew. Janeway was willing to entrust him with the critical task of guiding the Voyager through the slipstream. Shouldn't he have received a promotion by now? Secondly, as with almost all stories involving time travel, it is exceedingly difficult to understand how the different timelines work. How can the future Kim, at the end of the episode, send a message back to the present Kim if that future timeline no longer exists? Voyager, I found, typically relies on the explanation of, I know it's confusing, just go along with it. While it's nice that they do at least address this paradox, telling me not to think about it isn't going to stop me from spending a few fruitless hours trying to figure it all out. All in all, I thought that Timeless was a solid episode of Star Trek. While the ending could probably have been predicted after the first 5 minutes, the story's emotional core really resonated with me. I might not be compelled to rewatch the episode 50 times, but I do appreciate Joseph's recommendation this time around. Live long and prosper, Willow. Well, Willow, I want to thank you for that. Again, you know how much I love your letters. I think you're asking a real. I honestly, I love a good time travel story, but I think time travel stories are the absolute crutch of any science fiction show. Unless I think that there should be a law or some kind of if you're doing a science fiction television show, you only get to do one or maybe two, depending on the run of your show, time travel stories, because ultimately, look, a time travel story, to me, it's like, okay, the writers have run out of a real story. Like, how could you wouldn't a Harry Kim feeling a guilt or pain over something he did, couldn't you tell that story without time travel? Absolutely you could. I mean, look at In the Pale Moonlight, one of the greatest episodes of Deep Space Nine. I can live with it. That's a great story. Time travel stories are easy. You can always come up with a crazy situation. You can always show, oh my God, all of our characters are dead, except one who has been haunted by his mistake. Let's go back in time and fix it. Voyager frequently turned to time travel as a crutch. I think that was more of a Brandon Braga thing, because Brandon Braga, after something like First Contact or something like Parallels and Next Generation, there's a reason why. Time travel stories are also inherently interesting because you can show our main characters out of their normal milieu, so they're immediately intoxicating in some way, shape, or form. So, yeah, I agree with you. I think Timeless is a good episode of Star Trek. I enjoy it. I enjoy Living Witness. I think my favorite time travel story, but it's not really time travel, is Voyager's Blink of an Eye. There's a really interesting use of time. When the Voyager finds, I don't think it makes much sense, but I still love it. I love the idea of it. Voyager finds a planet that the planet itself is moving through time differently than, I guess, galactic standard. So hundreds of years pass by in the blink of an eye. And I thought that episode was really, really interesting. So you can still do it, but again, I do, in fact, get tired of it. I do. So what can I say? Yeah, I'm all for it. I'm all for it. Kenny Crayley Jr. writes in and says, Dear Robert, hey Robert, members of the Post-Geek Singularity, I'm back again with another letter, and for today's letter, I wanted to talk about my fandoms and why I will continue to enjoy them. I've always liked Star Wars, Star Trek, Marvel, DC, Disney, and other franchises, but a few years ago, I for a time almost walked away from fandoms altogether because of the endless complaining, hate, and redirect. Oh, this is bad, and that is bad, and such. But what stopped me from doing that is because my love of these fandoms through thick and thin, good times, bad, and such. I have never, ever been one of those fans to say, oh, this is bad, and that's bad. Anytime when I watch a story, if it's good, I'll give it praise, but if it's bad, I'll say why it's bad, but I'm always civil about it, and I try to be. I know it's hard in this day and age with everything going on. It's hard to be civil about any fandom with the likes of Star Wars, Star Trek, Marvel, DC Comics, Disney, and other franchises. You know why it's hard to be civil? Because there's so many idiots. No, I'm just kidding. And other franchises, etc. But as long as their stories are good, or if at times they're not so good, it's always healthy to talk about it. But be civil. That's why I never get into fan wars or sometimes ship wars about what's better. It's not healthy. I just like what I like, and I like to talk about what I like and move on. Well, those are my thoughts, Robert. What are yours? Take care, Robert, and keep up the amazing work. Sincerely, longtime watcher, listener, Kenny Crayley Jr. from Ohio. Well, Kenny, thank you for the letter. I appreciate it. I grew up loving. I didn't have anybody to talk to about my fandom. I was in the way some people are in the closet about some things. I was kind of in the closet. Not really, but everyone knew I was a complete, utter fanboy. But I also had a real life. I had a life. I wrote for the school newspaper. I was in student government. I had girlfriends. I went skiing. I did all kinds of things. So I skirted two worlds. But it was only because I didn't have, people didn't know that I was at home surrounded by blueprints of the Enterprise, memorizing where everything was on the ship. I knew where the Enterprise's bowling alley was. I didn't want people to know that. I would have, if I had a porno magazine and I was doing something debasing myself and someone walked in on me, I probably would have been less embarrassed than having somebody walk in on me with my Enterprise blueprints surrounding me, with my model of the Enterprise that I had built, like looking around, and that would have been even more embarrassing, because if people caught me, masturbating, it'd be like, okay, people masturbate. Somebody catches me with my Enterprise blueprints and me holding the Enterprise up and like trying to reconcile everything. People be like, oh my God, what are you doing? There would have been less understanding. But so I didn't have anybody to talk to about fandom. And then it was so much fun when the internet, when I first, as I've told people, in 1988, John Parkan, my roommate, had a BBS board, had 20 people could write in or could call into his computer. And it was sitting on the dining room table, and I would just sit there, and 20 people could call in, and we'd have text conversations, and it was a Star Trek BBS board. And I couldn't believe it. And I used to sit there for hours having and there was nobody who was anything less than, this is amazing, we're talking about warp drives, and it was incredible. And it wasn't really until you got on the boards on AOL, that things started to go south. I mean, I grew up when I went to conventions too, and I would have these long conversations with people, but there was kind of this underlying understanding that, look, man, if we're at a science fiction convention together, we might disagree, but isn't it awesome that we're here? Like, isn't this great? It's like my the Mike Damone. I think one of the great philosophies of life was embodied by the character of Mike Damone in Fast Times at Ridgemont High. Now, if you haven't heard this before, I've said it before, but Mike Damone is trying to tell Mark Ratner the secret of dating girls. Like, what do you do when you date a girl? And one of his rules is, and it's so great because he's doing this in this record store at the Sherman Oaks Galleria, and he's standing next to this life-size photo cutout of Debbie Harry. And he explains to Mark Ratner that one of the keys to dating, the secrets of being successful with the opposite sex, is you have to act like, wherever you are, you got to act like that's the place to be. And Mike Damone puts his hand around Debbie, and they're at the mall, right? And he looks at her and he's like, Debbie, isn't this great? And he gestures out to the mall. And that's kind of the way science fiction fandom was for me. It was like, no matter where I was, whatever convention I was at, whatever bulletin board I was on, it was like, wow. No matter where I was with fandom, I acted like that was the place to be, because it was the place to be. And the point being is that if you're with a girl, wherever you are with that girl, that's the place to be, because the two of you are together. That's the point. You have to act like it doesn't matter. We could be at the city dump, but as long as we're together, we're going to find some way to have fun together. And I felt that way about fandom. It has only been, and people have always argued, and there's all kinds of, go back to there's all kinds of flame wars and shit. But when the rise of the internet happened and lots of people could get together and suddenly start talking, shit started to go down. And that started to be different. In the 90s, things changed, and no one's ever looked back. It's just become more sophisticated. We've just got more ways to have flame wars with one another. So yeah, it's changed. I think, look, I can bitch about Star Trek Discovery, and I honestly believe that Star Trek has been really mediocre or not good since 2009. And yet there are a lot of people over the last 12 years is a long time. And there's been a lot of people that have come to Star Trek for the first time through the Kelvinverse movies and through Discovery and through Picard or whatever. That's the first time. It's a generational thing. And that why would they like it when you're telling them, I don't like this. This sucks. And they're like, well, I like it. No, it's bad. What are you going to get from those people? Are they going to be like your friends? No, they're going to take it personally. I get it. I totally understand. They're going to get mad. The question is, though, the question that really needs to be asked is it really good? See, it's one thing to like something, but it's a whole nother thing to know that what you like is bad. I admit, I know that things that I like are bad. I like them, but I understand they're not good. I think the thing, we're living in a time now where a lot of people don't understand that. They don't understand the difference. And they feel it becomes very tribal, and what we need is more critical thinking. And I think that's because, when you grow up in a world where you're special, like I didn't grow up in a world and think I was special. I thought other people were special, and I wanted to be like they were, but I didn't think I was special. You always had to strive. You had to boldly go, man. That's what Star Trek taught me. Boldly go. And if you're not boldly going, you're never going to be special, and you're never going to be the person you want to be. You got to boldly go. That was the message. And I think there's something different there. And I think what's interesting also is there is a lack of, part of the problem is there's a lack of critical thinking skills. And I do blame our educational system. I think it comes down to being able to think critically and think three-dimensionally. It's a skill that we're losing. And we need to be able to understand that, because if you like something, you should know why. And you should be able to understand what it is. And there are people, I've listened to people tell me why they like Star Trek Discovery. And I'm like, I can't argue with that. I have no pithy retort to your argument. If that's the way you feel about it, I'm like, I see that as a valid reason to like the show. I'll admit that. Right, I've seen that, and I wouldn't take that away. And I think there are people that do actually like Star Trek Discovery and have good reasons for doing so because of who they are. And I won't argue with that. But I would hope that they would listen to my arguments at least with an open mind. That's what I learned in school. That's debate class. You learn how to debate. You learn how to debate even topics that you don't agree with, but you learn how to debate. You learn critical reasoning skills and all that. And I think that's something we need. Anyway, so there you go. This one comes from Richard Stock. Richard Stock says, "Hi, Rob. Greetings from Barnsley, England. This is my second letter submitted to your show. The last one was about recommending The Raven books by James Barclay, who got me into the fantasy swords and sandals genre. How tables have turned, and I'm now writing to say thank you for giving me an opportunity to write and submit my own story for you and the judges' consideration. This is my first time writing anything for public scrutiny, so I'm a little nervous. I did try my hand at it before with another story I came up with a good 10 years ago. Even though the story I submitted started its conception a month or two ago, and even though it's a sci-fi horror story, some of it is based on real events in my life. And, well, I leave it up to people reading, hopefully, to figure out which parts really happened. Whatever the outcome, I had fun writing it, seeing how the story changed as it progressed over a short amount of time. Making adjustments here and hard editing choices, cutting out parts I wanted to keep, but made the story too long. I am under no illusion that the works that will come to you will make me feel humbled just to be in the same competition, even if I don't make the finals or even into the book. Good luck to you and all fellow connoisseurs. No matter what happens, I got Campia in my ear shouting in his best supportive voice, "Well done, you got off your butt and you did it, and you created something many never end up doing." That is very true. If I can make just one person be entertained, or even better, creeped out, then it's better than missing out, never trying, and regret what could have been. So once again, thank you for giving me a chance to try something new, create art, and distract me from the world as it is right now and my mundane job working in retail. All the best to you, and have a great day. From Rick. Rick, I love hearing that. I'm still really, my mind is still on the film festival, which I'll end up being a month over what I want it to be, but I'm wrapping that up. By the way, for those of you who don't know, the Tonight Show with Jimmy Fallon announced they're having a film festival I saw yesterday. So I guess great minds think alike, and the films they want people to make are a minute long, and they're being sponsored by Samsung. And if you become a semifinalist, you get a brand new Samsung phone, and I guess you're supposed to make another movie with that phone, and we'll see. But I thought, well, I guess having a film festival, wherever you are, that's kind of going to be a cool thing. Look, obviously there are film festivals all over the world, so I would suggest everyone, enter that film festival too, because why not? But it's great to hear this from you, Rick. I really appreciate that, and if that's the best kind of letter to hear from you is that I've inspired somebody to do something, and that's what I thought that school was supposed to be for. That's why I think that education is, you just never know. You can't, the more programs and the more opportunities that you provide people, you just never know where they're going to wind up. And that's why I think education for its own sake is something that's unique. I mean, you say that you're working a retail job. What if this story is well liked? What if suddenly you find out that you have a talent to do something you'd never tried to do before and people like it? Who knows where that's going to take you? I think that's amazing. And it's amazing that you did that. And for those of you who don't know, the Burnettwork is sponsoring a short story competition. We are going to publish a book. That I promise you. We're going to publish a book called, I call the audience, The Imagination Connoisseurs. That's the name of the book. We've got the book and we've got, you can design the cover. But the idea is the book is going to be called The Imagination Connoisseurs. And that blanket title is what should inform the short story that you write. And when I say, what is an imagination connoisseur? That could be, and you don't have to tell me in your story. Your story could be something that refers to that obliquely. You don't even have to use the phrase imagination connoisseur in your story. I don't expect anybody to. You could write a story that is about what is an imagination connoisseur. When did you become an imagination connoisseur? What does being an imagination connoisseur refer to? Maybe you're writing a story that you think would appeal to imagination connoisseurs. It doesn't matter. I have a lot of anthology books. I love books of anthology. I love anthologies of short stories. I love anthologies. I've always loved them, and publishing an anthology that I could edit has been a dream of mine. And, having an audience out there that's going to submit stories is allowing me to fulfill that dream. And I think, one of the things this channel is always going to do is going to be running some kind of competition and celebrate short stories or movies or talent of any kind where we can share these things with one another, because God, who knows? And as I said, all we ask for is the right to publish the story in this book once. There will be profit sharing, of course. Not that we're going to make any money. I don't expect. It's going to be what we call a loss leader. It's just going to be fun to have published a book. And then, of course, I'm going to pick one of the stories, maybe not the winning story, because the winning story might be a short story that would cost $100 million to produce. But I am going to pick a story that, and, I've been thinking about I'm thinking about like the Strange New Worlds contest they used to have. For 10 years they published Star Trek fiction, and they did have winners. They had which we are going to do. We're going to have first, second, third place, and so that'll be fun. But it's going on now until April. I think April 14th. We said April 15th. We pushed everything about a month. And so anybody, there you go. The Imagination Connoisseurs is the name of the book, and you can write a short story like Rick has. So that's pretty cool. Now, that was a great letter. So thanks. I appreciate that, sir. James Wallace writes in, our friend James Wallace. Hi, Rob. James Wallace here, and the second time this week I've sent in a letter, and that's a record for me. I'm reading the Nolan Variations, a fascinating book so far. I've watched Tenet 4 times now, and it keeps getting better and better. I understand the criticisms about the sound. The first time I saw it was at the IMAX in Orange County. No problem really with the sound or understanding the dialogue, but the film was overwhelming, and I had to think about it quite a bit afterwards. Second time I watched it with my parents over the holidays, and no problem with the sound, but they were confused, and we discussed the film afterwards. The third time I watched it at home, and sound was a problem. So for the fourth time, I watched it in closed caption. Interesting what you hear in the dialogue when reading it. This is not the first time Nolan has gone down the sound rabbit hole. Inception and The Dark Knight Rises had complaints about the sound. With Inception, one line of dialogue that's hard to hear makes the difference how to interpret the film. And The Dark Knight Rises is the stuff with Bane at the beginning. Part of me thinks Nolan does this on purpose so you'll revisit the film like one would his idol Stanley Kubrick. Hell, Alien, the sound in that film with dialogue is murky at times, and The Gentleman, McConaughey's last scene in the film, is hard to understand. I had to turn on the closed caption for that scene. Now both Tenet and The Gentleman I've grown to love more and more on each repeat viewing. 2001 and Blade Runner took me at least 5 viewings before I loved those films. I didn't like them at first, but just something that kept bringing me back to watch those films. I was 12 with loving Blade Runner and 16 with 2001. I think your enthusiasm and love for Star Trek the Motion Picture, the director's edition, reinvigorated my love and wanting to revisit that film to the point I was watching it a few times a week for a while there. Then there's the opposite spectrum, a movie you love, for me, Manhunter, that years later just doesn't hold up. Watched that film recently and it has a lot of problems. I love the style, but the acting, ouch. Oh, come on, now it's just you and me, sport. My question, what are 2 films that stand out for you as films you may not have cared for at first, but grew to love, and 2 films that you may have loved initially but didn't really care for on repeat viewings? Oh, a movie that I absolutely hated the first time I saw it was The Talented Mr. Ripley. I know, right? I hated it. Maybe because I was hungover. It was Christmas Day, and we'd been obviously partying, and we went and saw a double feature. I went and saw Talented Mr. Ripley. It was when I was still married. Talented Mr. Ripley and Any Given Sunday. And I hated Talented Mr. Ripley. And then I watched it. I don't know why. I bought the DVD because it was Anthony Minghella, and I'm like, okay, I'll watch it again. And I loved it. I loved it. I loved it. I love The Talented Mr. Ripley. So, and I'll give you a secret. I'll tell you, here's something you're going to be like, what? I'm going to throw my credibility to the wind with all of you. Another movie that I didn't like very much when I first saw it, Casino Royale. Casino Royale. I didn't like it that much. And I don't know why. I was expecting something, and now I'm like, every time I watch Casino Royale, which I absolutely love, every time I watch it, I don't know what I was thinking the first time I saw it. I know, right? Isn't that crazy? I've watched Casino Royale probably 30 times. And there's so much about it that I love. I can't even imagine not liking that movie. I guess it was because it was just the attitude I had going in. Yeah. So there you go. And then 2 films that you may have loved initially but didn't really care for on repeat viewings. That's harder for me. I don't know if I have that. I don't know if I love film because I usually go with my gut. I don't know. That's a good question. So it's a good question, but I can't think of 2 films I loved initially but didn't really care for on repeat viewings. Yeah, I can't think of any. With Manhunter though, I can understand that because things get dated. But I usually don't mind that. But good question. Thanks for writing in. I've been remiss. What have you guys and girls and gentle beings and kind souls from across the 28 known galaxies, what have you been talking about? I have no idea. I know you've been saying a lot. There's been a lot happening out there in this land. And let me find out what that is. Let me get back to this and find out lots of super chats and lots of things being sent in. And here we go. Let's bring those up. Anonymous says, in 1962, the movie was called King Kong vs. Godzilla, and King Kong won. Now it's Godzilla vs. Kong. Godzilla gets top billing. That's why this time he wins. You know what? I don't think it's going to be that kind of a fight. I think it's going to be a different kind of a fight. I think at the end, I think it's going to be some kind of they're not going to fight. They're going to team up. They're going to realize both of them are different kinds of people. There's no reason for them to be fighting. Their interests are not at cross purposes. But you might be right about that. Jonas A. sends in a tip and says, hi, I loved whining about movies. Let the right one in. I love the movie and book. The writer has actually written a short story with only small, subtle hints of Ellie and Oscar's further story. Let the old dreams die. It may surprise you. I didn't know that. Keep up the great work. Well, thanks, Jonas. I love it when people go back and watch our old whining about movies. By the way, this might be a good time to mention that we are doing Westerns now. We're in the middle of Westerns Week. We have finished the first week of Westerns Week, and we are watching True Grit, both versions of True Grit, the original, the John Wayne version, and then the Jeff Bridges version that the Coen brothers directed. And we're also watching Clint Eastwood's Unforgiven. However, we have come up with, we had viewer's choice. We had one movie that viewers picked, and the viewer's choice came down to this is such a tough one. Once Upon a Time in the West, The Searchers, and The Wild Bunch. And the movie that we are going to watch, because it sort of counterpoints My Darling Clementine, we are going to watch Once Upon a Time in the West. That's right, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to watch another movie by our man Sergio. I know people are like, well, why is that? Because it's fucking awesome. And the other two movies, The Wild Bunch and The Searchers is these movies are great. But what happens in The Wild Bunch, I want to deal with with Unforgiven. And we could have done Searchers, but I figured we're going to end with John Wayne and with True Grit. So, but The Searchers is a great film. I love Searchers. So that's what it is. Once Upon a Time in the West. Very exciting. Very exciting. So that's what we are watching for our movie. Anthony Gonzalez. Actually, Roger Haynes sends in a super chat. Thanks, Roger. No question, though. No statement. Roger Gonzalez sends in a tip and says, hello, Rob. I came to the conclusion yesterday, and this is important, that Devil Inside is better than Need You Tonight. But now the question is it better than Suicide Blonde? Okay, Anthony's clearly an INXS fan, and so we're Devil Inside is better than Need You Tonight. You know what? I think you're right about that. Because dun 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 dun, dun is better than dun 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 dun, dun. But then again, Suicide Blonde. You know what? I Devil Inside and Suicide Blonde. That's a tough one. You know what? I would say that Suicide Blonde is one of those. All three of these songs, by the way, are great. I'm a huge INXS fan. Although these are later INXS songs. You know, some of my favorite INXS songs are off Shabu Shaba and The Swing. These are later, but I think Suicide Blonde it's a pretty cool song, and I love the horns in it. But that's tough. Devil Inside and Suicide Blonde. You know what? I might change my mind tomorrow on this one. I'm going to go with Suicide Blonde now because Suicide Blonde is such a great party song. But Devil Inside is I think it's more ubiquitous. Like if you have a mixed tape or a mixed playlist when you're skiing and Devil Inside comes up, I think Devil Inside's a great song for skiing. I think it's a great song for driving. And Suicide Blonde is a little bit, I don't think it's as ubiquitous, but I'm going to pick it right now. Wow, As Heel versus Babyface sending me a very generous super chat. What's with you, man? I really appreciate this. I think I'm gonna take these super chats and buy a figure and make it my specific. I'm gonna call it. This is the As figure. Heel versus Babyface. As says, I always thought that if they did reboot TOS Star Trek before Jar Jar did, Gary Sinise would be the perfect Bones. I agree. Gary Sinise, I love Gary Sinise, and he would have been a great Bones. I mean, Carl Urban was great as Bones, but he's clearly he's recreating DeForest Kelley. He's doing a DeForest Kelley impression. I think Gary Sinise being Gary Sinise I think you're right about that. He would have brought more Gary Sinise to the role, but I think you're right. I think that's really great. Yes, absolutely. You're right about that. But man, with your super chats, dude, you're so generous. I'm gonna have to buy a figure based on what you've been super chatting me. Glenn Taylor sends in a super chat and says, Rob, I enjoyed the Australian accent on whining about movies. So how about doing Quigley Down Under or The Man from Snowy River? The Man from Snowy River is a great movie. Not maybe those are both good movies. I like them. Robert says, how would you rank the King Kong films? Wow. All of them? Well, God, that's tough. How would I rate them? Well, obviously, I grew up with the original. You know, Willis O'Brien, King Kong, the King Kong movie. Carl Laemmle presents, right? The original King Kong, I'd have to say I love. But, you know, going back now, I loved John Gillerman's, was it 1976? The Jessica Lange, Jeff Bridges King Kong. I like that. When I was a kid, saw that, I was like, that movie kicked ass. I was like 9. I like that. I love Peter Jackson's King Kong, too. And I love King Kong versus Godzilla, the original. I don't know if I could rank them because they all mean different things to me. Like, I love when King Kong came out, it was a big deal. Paramount, the ads, King Kong straddling the late lamented World Trade Center with the jet fighter in his hand. Boy, that was a lie. I love that movie. And it's not the greatest movie in the world. I love John Barry's score for that movie. But I love Peter Jackson's King Kong. I love the whole opening in New York City. I love all that stuff. So I don't know if I could rank them. I don't know if I could rank them. I don't know. I mean, look, if I were to, I loved Kong Skull Island too. I mean, I thought Kong Skull Island was great. I loved it. I just, I don't know if I could rank them though. Yes. Do I know that Peter Jackson's King Kong is too long? Yes. Do I think a lot of it, like the stampede of the T-Rex and all that, is it over the top? Yes. But I love it. I mean, I do love it. I love Kong Skull Island. I love the King Kong from 1976. I love the ridiculous King Kong versus Godzilla. I love that too when I was a kid. I thought it was dope. So but I can't rank them. They all mean different things to me. S Beam sends in the super chat. Thanks, S Beam. I appreciate that. Mark C, our own favorite, the official toxic fan of the channel. Mark C says, Rob, today's storytellers do not care. Their storytelling job is to socially engineer you. Have you noticed that the word diversity has almost completely replaced the word variety within your speech? Your engineering processes quite well. Well, you know what? I've always used the word diversity. I just didn't use it. I never thought about using it. I always use diversity rather than variety. Like the diversity of material. That's just something I've always said. I don't like the fact that now whenever I say the word diversity, and I say it a lot, probably too much, I have to stop and go, oh, I don't mean that. So the social engineering that's happened to me personally is that I have to stop and explain what I mean by diversity, which I don't like. So either way, yes, I think that you're right. I've been engineered. Mr. Tickle Trunk sends in a super chat. Well, thank you, Mr. Tickle Trunk. I appreciate that. Stubble McShave sends in a tip and says, I haven't seen the new Stand, but from what you describe, it sounds like they've screwed up the sense of progression of the story. They have. It just made me angry. Maybe, if you've never seen it, I had friends that adore the original miniseries and they adore the book and they've been liking it, but it hasn't been working for me. But yeah, the sense of progression's gone. The story jerks you around and you're like, what's happening and what's going on? I don't know. Jeff Yerke is here, and Mrs. Y. I love that Jeff Yerke loves his wife as much as he does, because he never goes anywhere, even on a chat board on YouTube, without his wife, and that is to be commended. Jeff says, hi, Rob, can you explain why Bad Robot's Fringe is so much more watchable and why Disco and Picard are so horribly bad? Does it have to do with one being a blank slate and the other having 55 years of canon behind it? It vexes me. You know what? I think the writers... Let's do an experiment since you have asked. Okay. This is going to be a fun experiment. I'm really happy to do this right now. So let's take a look at bad robot shows. Let's look at Fringe first. Fringe. Okay, Fringe, the TV series. I'm going to go take a gander at the writing staff. Okay, the writers. The writing credits. There's a lot of writing credits on this show, including Akiva Goldsman. Always got to give work to Akiva Goldsman. All right. You know who wrote 6 episodes of Fringe? David H. Goodman. David H. Goodman, who is the current president of the, let's see. So David H. Goodman wrote for, well, let's go back before that. David H. Goodman, different David H. Goodman than I know, but David H. Goodman wrote before Fringe. I actually only worked on Without a Trace. But, all right, let's do that. Jason Cahill wrote 2 episodes. Jason Cahill wrote Profiler and Surface, which I guess that's all right. He also wrote Halt and Catch Fire. He was the co-executive producer of Halt and Catch Fire. Oh, here are my friends Zach Stentz and Ashley Miller. What did Zach Stentz and Ashley Miller work on before they got to Fringe? Andromeda and Terminator, the Sarah Connor Chronicles. Not bad. David Fury, who wrote 7 episodes of Fringe. What did David Fury write before Fringe? 24, Terra Nova, Lost, Angel, Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Not bad. Genre shows. Let's see. Let's go up to Nora. No, let's go up to, Akiva Goldsman. Jeff Pinker, who wrote 26 episodes of Fringe. What did Jeff Pinker write before he got to Fringe? He wrote Alias and Lost and Fringe. So there you go. Alias and Lost. Genre shows. Kind of, I could see that. You've got, of course, and then, of course, it's J.J. Abrams, Alex Kurtzman. They created it. J.H. Wyman, who wrote the most episodes of Fringe. What did he write before Fringe? Harry Green and Eugene, Repo Cohen, Keen Eddie, and he was an actor and a writer. Let's see, what else did he write for? Interesting stuff. Okay. But mostly, and then you went on to write Almost Human. This actually isn't going as well as I thought I was going to make my point, but okay. David Wilcox, another writer, before Fringe, wrote Life on Mars and Law and Order. So, respectable writing, but okay, Life on Mars. Now let's go and let's look at Star Trek Discovery. So we go to Star Trek Discovery, and let's see about the writing of Star Trek Discovery. Series writing credits. I'm just going to go look at these. Okay, so you got Ted Sullivan, my friend Ted Sullivan. What did Ted Sullivan write before he got to Discovery? Well, he wrote on Supergirl, and he wrote on Revenge. He wrote on that. Okay, so Supergirl, genre show. I can see that. Akiva Goldsman, of course. Then we go down let's go up to people like, okay, Gretchen Berg. Gretchen Berg, one of the showrunners. What did she write? Gretchen Berg, Roswell, the original. John Doe, Wonder Falls, obviously a Brian Fuller person. North Shore, Pepper Dennis, The Woman's Murder Club, Pushing Daisies, Mercy, Off the Map. So, Michelle Paradise, who's the new showrunner, who's running the show now at Star Trek. She wrote on X's and O's and the originals. That's her experience. So, why is she writing science fiction? I don't know. Bo-Yeon Kim, 20 episodes at Discovery. Bo-Yeon Kim wrote for The Adventures of Rocky and Bullwinkle. That's additional crew. Let me go to his writing. He wrote Click Your Heart and Rain. That's what he wrote. And now he's written 20 episodes of Star Trek Discovery. Anthony Moranville, 14 episodes of that he's written. He wrote on Monk and Scare Tactics. Oh, no, that's additional crew. He's not a writer. Hang on. As a writer, he wrote one episode of Monk. He wrote Hollywood Adjacent and The Secret Life of Orange Traffic Cone Assassins. So I think when you look at this, the people that are writing on Star Trek Discovery has less of a track record with genre television than the people that wrote on Fringe. I think that's where it comes from. And that's about it. So there you go, Jeff. Does it have to do with one being a blank slate and the other having 55 years of canon behind it? It vexes me. You know what? Other than Kirsten Beyer, who's a Star Trek novelist and a very good Star Trek novelist, and I can only imagine she's had a hell of a time getting any of her ideas or getting her ideas in their full distilled form onto screen, I would think that, again, the problem is these are people that don't write science fiction. And if they're not really writing science fiction, I bet you they haven't read a lot of science fiction. And I think the people that worked on Fringe were just more, both the directors as well, the directors of Fringe, and directed more science fiction. I think they understood more. I just think it's built into the DNA of the show. The permanence o chronoclasm. I believe this is the first time that the permanence of chronoclasm has ever sent in a tip or anything. Long time viewer. I'm laughing over here about 30 years of Batman. On screen, he's killed numerous times and nobody's given a fuck for 30 years. Tell the young man that Bats is 80 years old and is killed periodically. Tired of the bullshit. Yeah, that's true. I mean, but it's how people, came to Batman. I mean, I think the idea that it's never, to me, the idea that Batman and Superman don't kill is absurd. I've never understood where people get that from. Batman would have to kill. So would Superman in doing what they do. I just see, I don't see any way that they could not. Joanna Bongo, Jeffrey Moy, Jet Screamer, Michael Preston became a member, Evan Newman, Steve Marvin, Cockney Spock, the Little Trekkie. I think you guys were already members, but it just shows up. It just keeps doing that, recycling that, which is cool. I appreciate all the members of the channel. By the way, we are going to be starting, the people at that certain tier, we're going to be having special chats after the show beginning next week. So that should be fun. Mr. Tickletrunk. A lot of us, Mr. Tickletrunk goes in one of two. A lot of us have lost the artistry of argument. I used to have fun as a kid arguing if movie Picard was totally different character to TV show Picard, but I also remember having fun. We find people we agree with and just talk to them. I hate it. Let's see. Mr. Tickletrunk goes on to say, I also can't stand that so many think talking to people that are different or think... I also can't stand that so many think that talking to people that are different or think to be immoral is a sign of wrongdoing. If I like chunky peanut butter and walk into a smooth peanut butter convention, why not go and walk out with a few more chunky peanut butter lovers? Hey, look, I don't understand. I don't mean, there's a lot of people that say all kinds of crazy stuff, but, the fact that I talk to a lot of different people... I get called upon or I get called out when I go on someone's show that other people don't like. Like, why are you on that person's show? And I'm like, because nobody is all evil and bad, and nobody's all great and good. I mean, I like people. I like everybody's different points of view. I've been talking to people with different points of view my whole life. Maybe it's because I started working in retail, and I met all kinds of different people every day, and I liked talking to everybody. I didn't have a choice. I was there. They were going to come in, and I was fascinated by people. I'm like, how is it that I was working at a store, I worked at a place in Seattle called Silver Platters, and it was, at the time, the largest optical disc retailer in the world. We had one store that was 10,000 square feet, and all we sold were CDs and Laserdisc. That's it. I mean, Tower Records had more stores, but for somebody that sold only one thing, we didn't sell cassette tapes and records and CDs, and we only sold CDs and Laserdiscs. That's it. And I was always fascinated. I was the manager and buyer of the laser video disc portion of the store, and we had at one point 4 stores. But I always wondered, how is it that people are coming in to buy either movies or music, and I would have thought that to come in and do this, everybody would be happy. I was always happy. I walked into work every day and I'm like, I love being in this store. Everything I love was great. CDs and movies. I had music and movies. And I had my access to all of them. Whatever came out first, I would get. It was great. And I would have thought that everybody who walked in the store would be happy. You'd be surprised at how many miserable fucking people would come in and bitch about CDs. I mean, I was there the day the first Beatles CDs were released. Oh my God. Did I hear a lot of people pissed off about whatever, the digital remastering? And it's like, and I was sitting there going, you cannot tell me that this CD does not sound better than a cassette tape does. You cannot. You cannot tell me. And people are like, well, let me tell you about my Nakabichi tape deck. Blah, blah, blah. I'm like, no way. I don't believe you. I don't believe you. But they did. James T. Whalen sends in a super chat and says, we are a year apart, have similar conventions, toy, BBS experiences. I love listening to you alone or with the gang. Thanks so much. Well, thanks, James. I mean, I've always wanted to talk to more people about that because, you don't talk to people much about when was the first time you were ever on a BBS board and what it means. I mean, nowadays people think it's hilarious. Like I want to know how many people got those AOL discs in the mail. How many did you get? 100? 200 to load AOL on your computer? I mean, it's funny because that's like a 25 years ago thing, getting those AOL discs. Maybe it's not that long. Maybe it's 20 years. But, to try and explain that to people just look at you like, you're so old. It's like Logan in Logan's Run looking up at Abraham Lincoln. That must be the look of being old. That's what AOL discs have become. Anonymous sends in a tip and says, the real villain in Godzilla vs. Kong is Han, Sun Kang, who is the one that provoked Godzilla to kill people, and Shaw will be the savior. Man, they haven't delayed Fast and Furious 9 yet. They haven't delayed, or as I like to say, Justice for Han yet. Crazy. Mr. Tickletrunk says, I hope my messages made sense. I'm typing with a splitting headache. Well, here's one for you old people. Da-da-da-da. I know that means nothing, I'm sure. But that was an old headache medicine ad. I hope you feel better, Mr. Tickletrunk. Brendan Sheehy says, Rob, I know you, like me, you love your survival genre films. I recently watched Everest and found it to be more intense and scary than most horror films. The verisimilitude is high, as the film doesn't take many artistic liberties with this real-life harrowing tale. Everest is really good. If memory serves, that came out in 3D, too. I should look into that. Yeah, Everest is great, and everybody should watch that. It is good. It's really, really good. Will N. And the thing is, I love harrowing. The Impossible. I did not see The Impossible, like with Everest. I didn't see it when it first came out in the theater. I watched it later, and I got the Blu-ray of The Impossible. If you guys haven't seen The Impossible, I was literally watching The Impossible like this. I mean, I was like rocking in my. It's about, it's loosely based on the tsunami in like Indonesia, and I felt such agita watching that movie. I'm like, this movie fucking kicks ass. I love this movie. It was terrifying, like Everest. Will N. says, I watched The Quick and the Dead for Western Week. Great cast and crew. Unfortunately, a disappointing film, I know. Although Sharon Stone shows some boobage in this one. Your thoughts on this movie? Well, The Quick and the Dead's a lot of fun. Sam Raimi directed it. I like it a lot. I wouldn't call it a quintessential Western, because it's a pastiche. It's a different kind of thing. It's a Sam Raimi movie, but it's a lot of fun. Come on, Russell Crowe. Richard sends in a tip and says, I don't know if you've seen the latest episodes of Doctor Who. Suffice to say I feel the same way about Doctor Who that you feel about Star Trek. Oh no, I haven't seen all of them, but the Jodie Whittaker, I love Jodie Whittaker, but the Jodie Whittaker Doctor Who episodes, I'm like, wait, what? Too many Doctor Who is some cheap compromise sci-fi show across the pond. Oh, too many Doctor Who is some cheap compromise sci-fi show across the pond. But to me, it's like being, a box that's just magical and full of possibilities as the box that Doctor himself travels in time. Russell T Davies and Stephen Moffat certainly took full advantage of that, but I can't say the same for Chris Chibnall. Whatever your political, leanings lie, I've never known someone to be handed something so magical and then not only do so utterly little with all those tools, but not only ravage everything else that made them with such a childish ego. To spend one season loudly proclaiming that you weren't going to bring any of the old monsters back, but then in the very next season go the complete opposite and bring all of them back, tells us a little of who we are dealing with here. But not only that, claiming the Doctor's history was some confected trick by the great Gallifreyan patriarchy is too cute by far. Oh my God. The biggest heartbreaker is that it's likely not only damaged Jodie Whittaker's career beyond repair, but put the interesting idea of a female Doctor Who to bed. Look, I'm with you 100% on that. Jodie Whittaker, I think, is a great actress, and I think she was so ill-served by what was done to her. I think that what they did, even with why am I drawing a blank on his name? But with the oh my God, the first Doctor Who when they brought him back, why am I drawing a blank on his name? His face is in my mind right now. Now I have to look it up because why am I drawing a blank on it? I know I've said this word a million times, and I don't get it. And why am I thinking that? And I'm stupid for not knowing. Christopher Eccleston. By the way, I didn't even get to his name on here. I was looking it up. But Christopher Eccleston, when they brought him back, I loved him as Doctor Who. I wanted him to stick around. But then, I love when they brought everybody else in. And I thought that the Doctor Who's were great. I even like Peter Capaldi. And I don't think he was, the scripts were even great for Peter Capaldi. And I mean, Matt Smith, I thought that was hit and miss, but Eccleston, and moving on, I thought all that stuff was really, really, really great. I mean, I really did. I thought what they did was really, 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 really awesome. I mean, you think about Eccleston was an interesting choice because he was kind of a badass, but like David Tennant, he was a perfect Doctor Who, and Matt Smith was great. But I thought the stories were a little. Matt Smith's stories were not. I wasn't as on board, and Capaldi again not as good, and Jodie Whittaker, no. But again, I think Doctor Who, it really shows that you need the creators. I mean, Stephen Moffat was not as good, I don't think, as Russell T Davies, but that's not that like they're beyond reproach or anything. But it's interesting. Michael Hutchins Throg, our man Throg, is here. Rob, every true INXS fan knows the one thing cannot be dethroned as the greatest of their songs. Come on and get your shit together. Sorry, just had to get that out. No belts were harmed in the making of this tip. The one thing... I don't know about that. I don't know if I would say the one thing is the best INXS song. It's a great song, no doubt. Hang on. Let's see. Let's see. I'll tell you, one of my favorite INXS songs is that I think it's one of those, if they made like, here's the most popular songs, but here's the fan favorites, To Look at You off Shabu Shaba. The One Thing is obviously the first song on that album, but To Look at You is a great song. The One Thing is a great song. It is a great song, but I love To Look at You, and To Look at You might be my favorite song off Shabu Shaba. And let's see. Hang on. I want to also address The Swing too, and The Swing's album, because there's. Yeah, I think I like Shabu Shaba better than The Swing, but The Swing has some great songs on it too, because I love the song. I like all these songs. I mean, they're great. These albums are great. If you guys don't have these first two INXS, well, they're not the first two INXS albums, but they're so good. Both Shabu Shaba and The Swing are great. But The One Thing is a great album. It's a great song. I will say that. Anonymous says, "Hey Rob, I got the Seahawks over the Chiefs in the Super Bowl. Oh wait, sorry, I had my PlayStation on. Whoops! Why you got to torture me like that? You know what though? I got to tell you, I don't think the Seahawks, if they'd got to the Super Bowl, would have beat the Chiefs. I don't think they would have. Much as I might have liked to have seen that happen, I don't think they could have beat the Chiefs. I really want to see. I look. Being from Seattle, I hate the Patriots. I hate the Patriots, but I want to see Tom Brady win. Just because, how cool would that be? If Tampa Bay beat the Chiefs, they're not going to beat the Chiefs, but what if they did? That could be pretty neat. James T. Wayland sends in a super chat and says, "I don't have Facebook. 3-word review, Blade Runner 2049, beautiful but flawed." But James, you don't need Facebook to do a 3-word review. You can go to the website. Go to the Burnettwork.net website and put in your 3-word review. Do it now. So you can do that. Bobby Hatch-Kowal says, "Craig Mazin, the writer-creator of the amazing Chernobyl series and prior writing credits, Scary Movie 3 and 4, The Hangover 2, and 3, Identity Thief, Snow White and the Huntsman. Sometimes you can't judge a writer by their credits, I guess." I'll tell you something. I used to work with Craig Mazin. I worked with Craig Mazin at an advertising agency called Jacobs and Gerber. That's where I first met him. And he used to write ad copy. He actually wrote the line "Danger Runs Deep" that was on the Crimson Tide poster. And I worked with Craig Mazin. He first directed a movie called The Specials. That was the first thing that he directed that James Gunn wrote. I was the associate producer. I was full producer, but stuff happens. And so I've been a fan. Craig Mazin was always a very smart guy. He went to Princeton. He's very, very, very smart. And you know, I think you're right. You can't always tell what people do. People take the jobs they get, and sometimes it works out, and sometimes it doesn't. But television's different than movies. So when it comes to things like Fringe and stuff like that, I think Chernobyl was something that Craig Mazin finally controlled that was his own. I mean, I don't quite know how it all came to pass, but between that and the director they got, it was pretty awesome. Pretty awesome. So, yeah, I would say that Craig Mazin is a very smart man, and I really look forward to seeing what he does with The Last of Us. We'll see. But yeah, you never can tell. But television writers. Woo, yeah. Anyway, Alexander Wilson says, "Microsoft just posted over $43 billion in revenue in Q4 of 2020. It looks like they benefited from COVID. Gee, I'll say. Also, Disney uses their cloud platform to produce and edit content from a distance. Do you think that's a long-term play? Also, it ain't no fossil fuel." Yeah, I mean, I don't know what you mean, edit their content from a distance. Are you saying, like, editing their movies, like using the cloud to edit things from a distance? Like, I could do that. You can now edit from across the country or around the world if you wanted to. But I think, look, we're all living in the future. We're all moving into the future, and the people that aren't paying attention are going to fall behind. We live in a science fiction world, and you've got to stay up with what's going on in our world all the time. And you'll be better off. You know, there's something I've always wanted to try. There is a bot setting in here, and I've just put on. I don't know what would happen, but I just put on the robot bot. Now I should turn it off. I'll turn it off. I won't just turn it on here. That wouldn't be good. Who knows what's going to happen? Mark C says, "True Grit is great. Critics love it, but Big Jake is better. I think it encapsulates the perfect form of Wayne's Duke character." Yeah, but Elizabeth loves the remake of True Grit, so we're going to watch both True Grits because I don't think she's seen the first True Grit. But yes, I agree with you. But Big Jake is better. I think it encapsulates the perfect form of Wayne's Duke character. I love Big Jake. I think Big Jake is good. The Richard sends in a super chat and says, "Once upon a time in the West." He's going to have a Zoom watch party tonight. For those of you who haven't seen it, starts at midnight Eastern Standard Time or 9 p.m. Pacific Time to watch Once Upon a Time in the West. Yeah, there you go. Richard says, "Why didn't the race in the episode Blink of an Eye conquer the galaxy?" That's a good question. don't know. Maybe they destroyed themselves. I don't know the answer to that. It's a mystery. Anonymous says, do you think Kong or Godzilla need to take a COVID test in order to fight each other? Are they good to go? In this day and age, it probably would be prudent because, there's now a vaccine for dogs and cats. So maybe kaiju or giant monsters, they also have a way of doing that. So, I think I'm going to bring this one to an end, everybody. What a fun chat. What a fun day this was. I want to thank you for that. Actually, wait a minute. Let me see. I think there's one more letter I would like to read. Let's see. Was there? There was something I wanted to read. Actually, there's a lot that I wanted to read. Thomas Bertoldi is here. And he writes about Jurassic Park. An adventure 65 million years in the making. Welcome to Jurassic Park, Rob, sir, and of course, the Post-Geek Singularity family. Today, I'm your ever-so-excitable, geeky nerd, ever-so-exuberant tour guide. In 1990, a new novel hit the best-selling book list when it first came out, and that was the novel by Michael Crichton, Jurassic Park. Even before the movie, to be written by both Michael Crichton and David Koepp, was written, even before the book hit the shelves, Steven Spielberg had bought the rights to make a film adaptation of this techno-thriller about genetic theme park monsters. It broke ground, bringing these genetic theme park dinosaurs to the big screen, using a brand of new digital computer technology to create some of the dinosaurs seen in such an iconic, groundbreaking film that was loved by so many critics and fans alike. Stan Winston Studios made new bounds in creating animatronic dinosaurs come to life on the big screen. They even used stop motion to figure out how each dinosaur would look and move, even going so far as to hire Jack Horner to consult on the film. The sound used to make the creatures feel so lifelike also broke amazing new ground in special sound effects. And in 1993, Jurassic Park hit theaters, blowing all stops to be one of the best films of that year and make a huge impact on the box office. To this day, it is even regarded as a film that made it possible for computer graphics and film to come about, thanks to ILM at the time, which made it possible. It changed how movie effects and sound editing would be done forever. That's why this film will always be one of my favorites of all time. It looks amazing to this day. It had a story unlike anything else that had come before it. What if dinosaurs could be genetically engineered? And what if they were put in a theme park for all the world to see? Dinosaurs have always been a fascinating subject for many young children like myself at the time. You learn about them and you're in awe, and you see that childlike wonder come to the big screen was out of this world. It had a cast of amazing characters played by amazing actors and actresses. Alan Grant, played by Sam Neill, and Ian Malcolm, played by Jeff Goldblum. Laura Dern was cast as Dr. Ellie Sattler. When the theme park breaks down and the dinosaurs get loose, the film becomes a wild adventure like no other at the time. People die, dinosaurs roam free. Fences are down, and Alan Grant is lost in a park with kids. The film has some iconic scenes, the first being the first appearance of the CGI dinosaur, the Brachiosaurus. The iconic scene makes you stare in wonderment as John Hammond says, "Welcome to Jurassic Park." You, along with Alan Grant, ask how you did this. Mr. Dino DNA takes you on an animated journey to explain it all to the audience, struck in dumbfounded awe. We get one of the most iconic scenes when the T-Rex escapes and destroys a car, pushing it off a cliff, with Tim and Hammond's nephew still inside. But perhaps when Hammond says, "There she is," as the helicopter nears the island, one of the most iconic scenes in all the movie begins with that wonderful John Williams score. It pulls you right in. It hooks you. The adventure has just begun. After Ian Malcolm is injured by the T-Rex, he is found, and while lying on a table, most likely on drugs, says, "When the Pirates of the Caribbean breaks down, the pirates don't eat the tourist." A favorite line in the movie. But perhaps "Welcome to Jurassic Park" was the most iconic of the lines. There are many great lines like "Hang on to your butts," and "That's a big pile of shit." This is one of my favorite 90s films. I was 10 years old when I first saw it. In the entire film, I held my jaw open with dumbfounded, wild child expression, my eyes big in awe as I was glued to the screen and my rear to the seat simultaneously. I scooted to the edge of the seat when the raptors appear and never moved until after the T-Rex roars. Mr. Hammond, I've decided not to endorse your park, and as the helicopter flies off with the John Williams music playing and the credits roll. Jurassic Park will always be my favorite film, even today. I will never forget how much it meant to me as a child, and every time I watch it, I feel that same childlike wonderment as if it was my first time looking up the big screen with my heart pounding with pure excitement. This is why I love movies, and I always wish to feel like that again and again. Jurassic Park is just that damn good, I say in closing. Just that brilliant. It made me love dinosaurs even more. It made me that 10-year-old boy again. Well, Thomas, what a great letter. And what a great letter to finish this with. I too, look, I got to tell you, that scene where the brachiosaur rears up and bites the leaf off the tree when Sam Neill does the Sam Neill taking the glasses off, which is, you know, there are things that I just like. I like when people take their glasses off in movies. And I in my mind, I have some kind of a rating scale. Like the first person I ever recognized taking their glasses off was Oscar Goldman in The $6 Million Man. He would always take his glasses off. Steve, the fembots are loose. I mean, it would be something. And then, of course, David Caruso in CSI Miami. I mean, come on. But when Alan Grant does the glasses and the handshaking, might be one of my favorites because it is truly awe and wonder he is conveying. And I agree with you. So, in addition to having a fetish for action figures that come with chairs, I also love watching people take their glasses off in movies. I don't know, go figure. There's a lot of emotion that can be conveyed, and I hope to one day make a movie that has an iconic somebody taking their glasses off moment. I don't know if it'll ever reach the heights of Alan Grant, of Sam Neill in Jurassic Park, but I hope to one day. And with that, I want to thank my moderating staff. I want to thank Mike Bodden. I want to thank the Richard. I want to thank Bunyan Snipe. I want to thank Joshua Levesque. Justin Toner's here too. Greg Smith is here. Greg Smith is in the house. I want to thank you guys for being great moderators. Templar U sends in a super chat and says, "Hey Rob, what do you think of the Lord of the Rings show coming soon? I think the film needs a revival similar. I think film needs a revival similar to Peter Jackson's versions of Lord of the Rings. Look, I love the fact that this new Lord of the Rings show is about the Second Age. That the beginning of Fellowship of the Ring shows the culmination of where the Second Age led to, which is the first War of the Ring, or the battle with Sauron. I hope it's good. You know, I want it to be good. They have a lot of backstory, but as Gary Beekler, who's a huge fan, Nerdrotic, he always points out something that's always very astute, and every time he says it, I always think, yep, there's no dialogue to adapt. It all is going to get made up. And I think one of the big problems with adapting anything is you've got to have the voice of the material. And the writers who've written dialogue and characters, so much a character comes out of dialogue. They don't have any dialogue for the characters in that age. They've got a lot of information, but the characters are going to have to be written from whole cloth. And are they going to feel like they're part of Tolkien's world? I don't know. We'll have to see. Anyway. On that note, I want to thank all of you for supporting the channel through super chats and tips. I very much appreciate that, and becoming members and all that. We're going to do more with that soon. I think I'm going to put up some film festival movies tonight. Trying to get to the end of the film festival, and going to be making some announcements shortly. You've met some of the judges on the 600th show. Going to put those guys to work, guys and girls, and so that's all good there. And I will be back. Obviously, there is no John Campea show this week because he is moving. I can't wait to see what the new studio looks like. I'm actually very excited for him. I will be back tomorrow. Tomorrow's a busy day. Az and I are going to be doing another episode of Fully Articulated. And also, in addition to that, there is going to be a Robservations, and Whining About Movies takes us into the second week of Western Weeks. We will be watching Once Upon a Time in the West. Wow. Can't wait to watch Once Upon a Time in the West. If you thought Good, the Bad, and the Ugly was good, woohoo! Well, Once Upon a Time in the West, we shall see. And on that note, I want to say, every person you meet has a story to tell that you have yet to hear, and all you have to do is listen. And with that, I say to everybody else, have a better day.